Welcome to Belief Busters podcast, where we change the world one belief at a time. I'm your host, Reverend Cherie Taylor Jones, and I'm really glad that you could join us on the journey. Well, welcome to another episode of Belief Busters. Today, I'm really excited to have Stuart as our guest. Stuart is a property investor, husband, and father of four. And he is currently living in Surrey, which is in the UK. And his interests range from entrepreneurship to running. He's also a big fan of coffee. He's my kind of guy because folks, I'm a coffee girl. Reading personal development books, films, and trying to find quiet time. Aren't we all trying to find some quiet time? Stuart is also a host of Executive Juice Podcast. And it's a podcast where we squeeze the most useful insights, learnings, and mistakes from business leaders and entrepreneurs from all over the world. In summary, the vision is to create and introduce inspiring living spaces for both young professionals and students. And that's the piece that really intrigued me. And in the last 24 months, the company has developed a portfolio of property which generates a significant six-figure cash flow and has returned minimum 10% returns to investors. Welcome, Stuart. Really happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you for such a great introduction. I'm really happy to be on the show.
I'm really glad that we got to connect. And what I'm really attracted by what you do is that it sounds like you're creating these wonderful spaces for young adults and students to live and to thrive in. So how did you get here? Let's go from that piece.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I've got four children. We've been toying with the idea of sending one of them back, but we thought, no, we'll keep him for a bit longer. We'll keep him for a bit longer. He's only 3, bless him, so we'll keep him for a bit longer. But I've got 4 kids, and as part of my own investment journey, I bought a property down in the southwest of the UK, and started looking at student properties. So I thought, from an investment standpoint only, it makes a good investment. And when I went to see some of these properties, I've got to tell you, Cherie, I remember walking around one and thinking, there is no way when my children reach university age would I let them stay in one of these properties. They were, unfortunately, the kind of properties you hear about where, you have to wipe your feet on the way out, not on the way in. They were that bad. And I thought, I will start investing in these, but I'm not going to go down that path. What I want to do is raise the standard of living. And essentially the business model I wanted to follow with the company was, the very simple objective was, would I be happy to put my children in these places? And the element of it that is now quite amusing is that my wife now says that the student properties are better than our own living accommodation because they have better Wi-Fi, they've got bigger TV screens. Most of them are en suite bedrooms. Nice. And that is the case, but that is why I got into it. And we had a little chat before the show, and for me, I've been able to tie back to the fact that our physical environment does have a lot to do with how we operate in the world. And it's something that I've only learned, I guess, in the last couple of years, just how important our physical environment is to our own spiritual well-being, our emotional well-being, and the rest. So I'm not trying to make out I've got this huge, spiritual objective, but what I do know is that the properties we put together will play some part in how students and young professionals think and feel when they're not studying or working.
Yeah, I think it's really important because I know we've been indoctrinated from the time that we're young, right? About like what is wealth, what's acceptable. And somehow when we get into that university, so we're talking about what, like from 16 to 20 age range, we settle for so much less. And I'm kind of wondering if you have any insights onto why do we, at that point in our lives, think that we don't deserve to be in nice accommodations? Any thoughts?
I think certainly in the areas I work, it's just the accepted norm. It's that, and it is changing a lot, not just through the properties I do, but the accommodations that the universities themselves are putting up. Are the standard is increasing. It's getting much better. But I think at that age, I think, certainly from the generations passed down, I personally didn't go to university. My wife went to university, and she still remembers her university lodgings, and still cringes about thinking about it. And I think there was this kind of acceptance that when you left the home, this first time you've left adult supervision, that you were going to have to accept what was given to you at the rate it is. And I do see that's changed. It's certainly changed in the UK in the last, I would say, between 2 to 4 years, that there is now a greater expectation. But I think, there was just an expectation of that's just the way it was, almost this inherent thing, which is this is what we've got to accept.
Yeah. And so say a little bit more about the environment impacting how we see ourselves and how we thrive or don't thrive in the world at that point.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting point. And it's something I've spoken with a few people about in the last year or so in terms of our physical environments. My own experience really was talking about it, was just accepting things for the way they were. And, I had to go through my own sort of period of growth, if you like, spiritual growth, as we've mentioned before. I had I've been following a spiritual path for the last 15 years or so. And for me, I had to have a sort of a spiritual awakening to really see things differently, because I'd accepted things as the way they were growing up, that everything was the way it was, and I would have to follow the given path, and that meant living in the same environment. And for me, I was fortunate. I went traveling in my mid-20s, which took me through Southeast Asia and Australia, and got me to see a lot more different environments and how different people lived. And tying this back to your question, I think I always remember, and it's a phrase I heard somewhere else, but I always remember getting back from a year's worth of traveling, and I got back home to a street which I'd traveled down, for 10 years plus. And I remember thinking, something's changed. Something about this street has changed. And then I suddenly realized the street hasn't changed. I've changed. My perspective changed. And I realized that to really, look at changing our perspectives, we had to go out of our standard physical environments to really get us to think about changing how we think about things. And bringing that back to property, one of the new things we are looking at doing is as part of the Lord Panda Property company, we're creating a brand called Inspired Urban. And really that's about bringing urban things into the building to inspire. Something you mentioned, the Executive Juice podcast. One of the things that we always talk about on the show is what inspires people the most. And I would say 99% of the people I've spoken with have said that they feel most inspired outdoors. And it really got me thinking, well, how can I bring that into the property? And I'm really looking forward to a property we're working on at the moment where we're going to try and bring more of the outdoors indoors in terms of foliage on the walls and live plants. Walls are covered, and also bring some urban feel into the buildings. And for me, that's hopefully, and we need to trial it, but will inspire those that live there to be their best selves, and to realize that just because streets look the same, they don't have to think the same.
Yeah. What you just talked about is really about how do we evolve in our consciousness, and the more that we stay in that little box that we've been conditioned to live in, the more that we just follow, there's like this automatic pilot, and we don't even challenge the status quo. We don't challenge what we've been taught. And there's something about breaking out of that box, like you talked about when you went traveling. You get to see other people and their ideas and their beliefs. You know, right now, my husband and I, we are traveling across the United States in a motorhome. My husband's also from the UK. So we're just really exploring, and what I found even for myself, like I think I'm an evolved consciousness, let's say, right? Like I've done so much spiritual work, and even in this small context, I can see how other people can think the way that they think based on their environment and staying in that little box. You know, and it's really giving ourselves permission to get outside of that box, that we then change our worldview. It changes our worldview, like you spoke about. You know, it's like when I go back home and I see things, you know, you remember as a child how everything seems so large, right? And then you go back and it's like, wow, this is a really small town with a lot of small people. Your intention is about elevating people's living conditions to elevate their ability to thrive and look at things differently.
What was interesting about what you just said there for me was about being in the little box. It's how we get the cognizance, if you like, that we are in a box. And
Yes.
It's only by getting out of the comfort zone or putting ourselves in situations that are maybe alien to us that we suddenly start realizing that we are in that box. Because I probably lived in that box for the best part of 30 years.
Absolutely.
Before I did something different. And I think that's what's inspiring me, is like, can we do things differently?
Yeah.
and help other people realize that there are different ways to do things, not right, not wrong, just different.
I think our conditioning from our parents and school, and if you're in a church community, all of that is, you know, to be part of the tribe, right? Not rock the boat. Hopefully to help you be like a contributing member of society. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we don't realize that we're in that box. Often it takes a spiritual crisis or something really propels us to look at our lives differently and say, okay, so if I'm in a box, how do I shift that? How do I give myself permission to challenge the beliefs that I've been taught? You know, how do we give ourselves and others permission to go on this journey? Some of the work that you're doing, you're inspiring people to look at their lives differently, inspiring people to say, I don't have to accept what other people tell me is acceptable. You know, I can actually have more and be more fulfilled and step out of the box. So I love what you're doing.
We're just completing our first pilot project, which I'm really excited. I've got a local artist who does artwork, very urban artist, and I've looked at getting a very local artist to the area in which we work, and also looked at getting students from an art college to start creating that artwork. And the hope is that once we finish this property that we're working on now, because it's our first pilot project, that we'll be able to really start communicating what it is we're trying to do in the buildings that we have and in the community in which we operate. And that is really just trying to provide more than just a place for people to go to bed or do whatever it is students do of a night time, but also a place where they can start feeling connected, how we can create living spaces where people do feel inspired. But my big goal really is, what I want to create is a place where people want to take people to see. So they say, yes, I'm renting a room in this house, but I'd love you to come and see what it is. I'd love that's what I'm aiming for. If someone says, oh yeah, I had to invite one of my friends around just to see what this place is, that's my goal. And everything really centers around that.
There's pride in something that you love, that you feel inspired by, that you want to share it with the world, I think there's a ripple effect in that. What's coming up for me as you're talking is, wouldn't it be nice for the homeless folks to have those types of environments, that there's a sense of value and belonging, and that you deserve to be in a beautiful environment, like you're worthy of that, just because you exist. How that could transform the planet, really. Just that consciousness.
I completely agree. And that would be a mid to longer term objective of the business. Should we get to a stage where we can do that, I'd love to be speaking with housing organizations about how we can do that as well. And it's a really important point, the self-worth point that you've talked about, because my belief is that our environment is a reflection of us and vice versa. So if we can contribute in some way to helping people feel better about themselves, then that would be job done.
You get that right. That would be job done. Well done.
It's really hard in the material world to talk about spiritual things, because it's funny, when you did the intro and you talked about the property business and what we're doing in the revenues, it's kind of new information to me, because it's not where I'm coming from. Because I guess I got to a place where, don't get me wrong, I've got to feed the kids. Sure. They're expensive little buggers, and they need feeding. But for me, I realise that there is greater importance. But it's really hard to explain sometimes that externally we might have material things. We might be talking about houses, and we might have a car. But the real wealth is not coming from the outside in, it's coming from the inside out. And I think that's what I really like what you've talked about today. Is I think for me, I feel for the first time I've been able to, hopefully with you, articulate that a little bit better. That it's, yeah, good.
This is how we're creating anew. It's powerful. Like, I have goosebumps as we're talking about this, because it's just not the fluffy, let's pray. That's not evolution of consciousness. That's a way to connect with source, and I get that. But evolution of consciousness is, how do we take that from within now and create anew to make the world a better place, where other people are starting to thrive, other people are feeling worthy, other people are now going, yes, this is just the base. Now, what else can I do from this, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to being in that, woe is me, and I'm just barely making it, and I don't even want to go to my home because it's a hellhole, But now it's like, I'm home, I'm being inspired, I'm looking around, I'm seeing all this beauty, I'm feeling empowered. And now, how do I help others be empowered as well? This is good stuff, Stuart. I'm excited for you.
Well, it's interesting because we're sat in front of my board, and it's got some businessy stuff on it. It's got primary objectives and strategic objectives. But one of them, as you're talking about, one of them is create living environments that inspire those that live in them. Everything we do is designed to inspire those that we come into contact with to want to be more and do more. And that is because that has been my journey, is that I had to get experience where I was taught and shown that I was worth more than I might have thought I was. And that once I was able to experience that, then I could give that, and give that without expectation of return. Can we help others to raise? And you've said it better than I could have said it.
This is wonderful. I'm really glad to hear and just be excited for you on this journey.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for allowing me to talk about this on the show. I really appreciate that.
If someone wants to work with you, could you be specific on how would you collaborate with others, and how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, best way to get in contact with me is via LinkedIn. So it's Stuart Lordan, that's Lordan, and my Christian name spelled Stuart. I don't think there's many of us on there, so you should come through to me. That's the best way. Or Stuart at lordpandaproperty.co.uk is the best way. I work with investors that are really looking to invest funds. And I'm more than welcome. I'll always respond to messages and emails from anyone that's ever asked questions, and that's both to my detriment, but I enjoy it. But we'll always respond. So if anyone wants to reach out, please feel free.
So here on Belief Busters, we're not just looking at the spiritual concepts, but we're looking at how do you bust beliefs about your wealth, about thriving, about worthiness, what's acceptable, that you can be in a beautiful location that you call home and thrive from there too. So I'm just glad that you were able to join us on this episode of Belief Busters, and I'll see you on the flip side. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of belief systems. I hope this gives you permission to change your beliefs and subsequently the world. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast and leave a review wherever you listen. You can reach me at info@preachitsister.com. I've also written a book, Turning Your Why into Why Not, that gives you practical resources and steps that you can take to continue on the journey of exploring what your belief systems are. I look forward to seeing you next time on Belief Busters Podcast. See you on the flip side.